Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm Jeff Howard, and I am extremely pleased because I have filmmaker Clarke Wolfe with me. Hey, Clarke.
Hi, Jeff.
You did that so well, and I didn't even warn you that I would throw it to you right away. Because I kind of try to avoid the monologue in the beginning.
Sure.
But here comes the monologue.
Let's do it.
Clarke is on the Discover Indie Film podcast because your film, A Shining Example, was an official selection at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival in 2024, where I happen to be... Well, I used to call myself head programmer, but now the term is festival runner.
Okay.
Everyone says festival. I think they're just trying to copy that showrunner thing
Sure.
from TV. So I'm the festival runner and a big fan of your film, A Shining Example. And it took home 2 wonderful awards. It got the Filmmakers Award for Outstanding Writing Horror, and for both you and your co-writer, Dylan Guerra.
Yes, correct.
And you also got the Programmer's Prize for Exceptional Filmmaking. But I want to add that the Filmmakers Award is a jury of your peers. It's alumni from previous years of the festival. And I will forever be saying that that award means more. Because it's, you know, the other awards are decided by the selection committee. Mm-hmm. And it is a totally different vibe when you're watching 700-800 films and forming an opinion,
right,
versus the Filmmakers Board is alumni, so they're active filmmakers, and they just watch all the official selections, which, talk about a different point of view.
Oh my gosh. I'm always so impressed by film festivals and by the people that make up all the different bodies of a film festival. And so, yes, it is obviously, it's a huge, to be recognized by your peers is always a compliment.
Yeah, humble brag, I thought of it. I came up with the Filmmakers Board. I'm like, how can we pull in, because we wanted a community around the festivals.
Sure.
So that's why we do the mixers and the this and that and the podcast, and so it's kind of cool. So anyway, congratulations on your awards.
Thank you.
And as I warned you, this podcast is all about you and your creative pursuits. Yep. because yeah, you made an award-winning film. And as a festival runner, I am eternally grateful to people like yourself because, if I told you some of the stuff I see. So every festival, I go through an emotional roller coaster of, oh, it's going to be a bad year, it's going to be a bad year. And then you see good films and you're like, oh, it's going to be a good year. I never trust it. It's so funny.
Yeah. It's so interesting being on my side of the festival world. Because, sometimes you get no's from festivals and then you do see things that were accepted and you go, why, or how, or interesting. But every company has, every festival has their own mandates, and it's just a really interesting process. And then you hear people say exactly what you just said, whether it's, in the festival space or in just the industry in general, like, oh, there are so few good scripts, you'd be shocked. Or like, there are so few good, we watch a lot of stuff that's not great for our festivals. And then but still, you still get those no's. And that, I think, I've been in this business for a very long time in various parts of the industry. So I feel like I have, and I'm an actor too. So I feel like I have a pretty healthy relationship with no's and rejections. And yet, for some reason, when you have something that you're like, no, I think this is good. And then you get the no, you're like, wow, I don't get it. This is so hard.
And it is made worse if you do see the lineup. Yeah, because look, I see that. Look, mm-hmm. I always throw, between the two festivals, it's like 1,600 films I get a glimpse of.
Right.
Believe me, I don't watch them all. Mm-hmm. I start them all.
Yeah.
And when I see, I won't name them, but when I see a local festival that I'm aware of and I look at their lineup and I'm like, well, I've seen a couple of those and they're terrible. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realize, oh, so you're just good at running a business. Like you look and you see that they're local and there was a cast of 17.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, they're going to sell tickets. And it just goes in. And my story is I was on the festival circuit in the late 90s. Mm. And so I know what it's like to sit there and watch your film play and then see pieces of shit play and say to yourself, oh, I was happy to be in this festival, and now I don't know if they if they chose my film based on merit or for some dumb, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
It taints the whole thing.
I had a very similar experience, actually. I won't name the festival, but, shining example. So for the listeners, and I do hope that they'll get to see it soon. I don't have any official announcements, but, I think if you read between the lines about who produced the film, hopefully it will be on streaming soon, especially to coincide with the 45th anniversary of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which is this year, this Memorial Day.
I had no idea.
Yes, so that's been a big push to be like, hey guys, now please. But this film had so the premise of the film is it's The Shining with a mom. And having some fun with not only the tropes from Kubrick's film, but also from the novel. And then as a big Stephen King fan myself, but also as a big cinephile and somebody who loves horror, I certainly have a couple of things to say about Stanley Kubrick's film. And so that is sort of the idea behind this short. But I bring this up because it had a really tough time with film festivals. And now, to be fair, this was not created to be a festival movie. So had I created it to be a festival film, or had I taken that into consideration, I would have probably done maybe a little thing. I think our runtime is 15 minutes and 43 seconds. I would have probably got that down to 14 minutes and 59 seconds, that kind of stuff.
Just so they see a 14.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that said, so we were not horror enough for the horror festivals, and we were too dark for a lot of the mainstream festivals. And I do know this from a couple of friends who are programmers who encouraged me to submit the film, saw the film, and then didn't program the film. And so that was a fun experience for sure. But I
hope you got a waiver.
Trust me, I fought for a couple of those.
I find that terribly shocking.
Yeah. It felt terribly shocking, to be honest. So our film was really on the festival circuit last year in 2024. And of course, on the heels of the 2023 writers and actors strikes, everyone made short films. So it was a very extra competitive year, and you're having people who have celebrities in their films, and famous people who are, I'm just making a short, and of course they're getting programmed in the hopes that they'll show up, and we are not. And they don't show up. I
just airmouth, they don't.
I know, and they don't. And, it's funny, actually, I had this experience early where, there was a famous celebrity actor who directed something, and they gave him the best actor recognition at the festival. And of course, he did not come. And it was a perfectly good performance, but it also felt like, do you all understand the power that comes along with us as people who are up and coming to be able to say we won something? That actually does matter for us right now. That does not matter for this very famous person right now. So, but anyway, to get back to, I went through a process at the end of our festival run. So Sherman Oaks Film Festival was our finale. And
it's going to be the first or last, I think.
Yes, we went out, and we went out with a bang. I was honored that we went out with 2 awards that I'm looking at right here.
What a dork!
Today,
I brought Clarke's trophies to the table and had them next to me instead of next to you.
Listen, I'm not. This is not the medium for an unboxing, certainly, but towards the end of our run, there was a film. We had been accepted to a lot of women's festivals.
That was my I was actually going to ask, but your film has a intelligently subtle feminist message.
It does.
So I would have been really upset if women's festivals turned their back.
Yes, and I had a feeling that early on in the submission process that because I am really ingrained in the horror world, and so I know that my film rides that line. And so I specifically focused as much as I could on women's festivals and dark comedy categories, because it is a little different, and I knew that if they got it, they'd get it. And then the horror festivals we focused on were the ones that, or I focused on, were the ones that I know, okay, I love this one. There's a reason I'm submitting here. And then the more mainstream film festivals were the ones that, again, I know this one, this sounds exciting, and all of that. Towards the end of the run, there was a sort of a normal mainstream film festival that wasn't horror, it wasn't genre, it wasn't women's. And they kind of gave me a little bit of a runaround in that, they communicated the day before, the announcements were made, or the deadline was, okay, you're still in the running, but can you fill out this Google form? Are you coming? Do you have anybody in town? Is this any kind of premiere, and so on? And so I did. And then they sent another email like a week later being like, okay, you're still in the running. And I just was like, okay. And then I saw on their social that they started announcing selections. And I almost wrote a very nasty email saying like, how come on, like, really, can you please think about like you've been leading me on and stringing me along as a filmmaker for all this time, and you're already posting your selections. But then I noticed, wait a minute, let's check if there's a schedule. And there was not a schedule. So I was like, okay, hold your horses. And then we were accepted. But that was a festival where, when I sat in my block, I was shocked. And I kind of was like, they gave me such a runaround, and they put it down to the wire. And of course we were grateful to be included, but then I saw the rest of the material and I was like, how is this possible? It's just a really frank, you got to just really separate your emotion from this process. But again, having done this for so long, and especially being an actor, and in addition to being a writer and a director, I am more comfortable with, they wanted a blonde, or the leading man is 5'8" and you're too tall, or stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with you. And frankly, that's I think that's true across the board in a lot of ways. So I was able to have that conversation with myself, but after a year of like a lot of no's, it was kind of like, wow, this is hard. But we went out on a high note, so that was great.
Well, I will totally hassle you for the name of that festival when we're not recording.
Yep, I will happily tell you when we are not recording.
But I have I think we both know your film was getting in on merit, and the other films in your block were the ones who said, we're a premiere and we think we're going to, right? Like they were sending you that. Yeah. I mean, we sent a Google form.
Oh, of course.
But we do make it clear, like I mean, bleh, I can't even say, like we go with quality only, and like I think anyone who's attended our festivals is aware that like we only show good films. Yeah. And if, we had you probably didn't get to see it. It might have even been like in the other theater when yours was playing. Like we had an amazing wordless film from Munich, Germany, Yeah. Oh, I was wrong. Hamburg, Germany. Oh, mm-hmm. And it was like workers in a factory who turned into a ballet film until they escaped, and it looked like the film Brazil. Like it was super artsy.
Yeah.
And they actually had told us they were going to try to make it, but they couldn't make it. But it didn't matter. We're going to show the best film possible, even if it doesn't sell one ticket.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. That's just clearly that was what you were experiencing. They were like, well, A Shining Example is already played at a bunch of festivals. So they're not going to sell tickets. So let's put it off. All right, let's let it in on quality. We'll have one good film in that block. I don't know.
Yeah, who can say?
I hate that you have to go through that. But I guess your attitude is informed by being an actor, where you do. I mean, actors just get the worst end of it.
Yeah, it's part of the job. It's something that I'm sure a lot of actors talk about, which is great. It always makes me feel a lot better when people, like, not an actor, but when like Chris Nolan's like, well, I couldn't get into film school. And you're like, thank you for being honest about that. Like, thank you for saying that, because, and I'm not an anti-film school. I think film school is great I think it's great. I'm not saying anything negative about that. I'm just saying, like, yeah, they got rejected too, and there are so many actors who you have heard of who are known as the best of the best who got a lot of no's, and so I love when people who are a bit more, in the mainstream and are working and and who we aspire to look at are honest about the no's. And that's actually something that I tried to do on this festival run, was be very honest on social media. Like I have my little following from being an entertainment host and personality that I got my start, I've been an actor since I was very little, but
I'm about to ask for your life story.
Yeah, I'll tell you in a minute. I'll tell you happily, but it does kind of weave into it. Like in around 2013, when YouTube really started to pop and these movie chat shows or talk shows really began to pop, I saw this ad or a thing on Actors Access for a show called AMC Movie Talk, and it was AMC movie theaters, and they were looking for a knowledgeable host. And of course, I was like, well, I did go to film school. I have been a lifelong cinephile. And, but also I know that I can speak live. I know that I can speak extemporaneously. And, also I'm a girl who loves horror, and I'm a girl who loves superheroes, and I'm a girl who loves geek culture and genre storytelling. So that is my little edge. You know what I mean? I have something a little different. And so when I did get that job, that opened up this whole world of being a digital host and personality in that geek culture space. But certainly, as we've seen during COVID and with the influencer economy, the jobs that I have had for the last decade, that I was full-time, working regularly for DC and IMDb and AMC Networks and all the things, Nerdist and Collider and all these geek culture brands, those jobs just don't exist anymore. And if they do, they're occupied by one person, and they do everything because keep the costs down, right? So on this festival run, I was like, what do I have to contribute to social media right now? Like I love sharing the fun, glamorous stuff, like, ooh, I got invited to a premiere, like, let's put that on there. Or, oh, I have a movie coming out, that I'm in, like, yes, let's talk about it. But I really felt like, okay, well, I have a lot of different kinds of professional experience, and I can be honest about the no's, because if I can do that's more interesting to me right now than sort of the just influencer based persona, right? Like I want to be seen now as a filmmaker, and so I tried to be honest with the no's as well as the yeses.
Right, because you had a role where you did have to present positivity all the time, and so this was your opportunity to present the truth.
Yes.
And you apparently care about the truth, which I'm giving you applause because a lot of people feel like they have to put up a front all the time. And yeah, with the festival run, you really don't. You really don't.
No.
All right. Well, before I had so many questions already, but screw it. Let's just go back. Let's get your story. So, what came first? Did acting? Were you a kid who wrote all the time? I have loved movies since I can remember.
The Wizard of Oz is the one that started it all. And truly, The Wizard of Oz is like ingrained in my DNA at this point. But it also, now that I am an adult, it reflects kind of everything that I love about being an actor and a filmmaker. It's entertaining, it's funny, it's scary. And it is, a really incredible example of cinema. Like, I think I know adults show their children The Wizard of Oz today, and they still love it. So it's this wonderful, so that was a thing that really broke through to me. And ever since then, I have been performing and have loved, being a part of the story, essentially. And of course, like Back to the Future and Star Wars, these were also little me's, favorite movies. And so, yes, I have been an actor since I was little. And
right, so your first draw was to perform.
Yes.
Because the other magical thing about Wizard of Oz is the star is a child.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you could project yourself onto the screen.
Yes. And same with Back to the Future. Marty's a teenager. Like I definitely thought my parents have video of me standing up in front of the TV with a little guitar during Johnny Be Good, playing. So I grew up wanting to be Indiana Jones and Marty McFly, but also wanting to be Dorothy, So yes, but I always loved movies. Like I loved learning about movies. I loved being in the conversation about movies and being able to talk about pop culture. And like I always tell the story about how I had an Entertainment Weekly subscription at the age of 12, and so, but when college rolled around, and I grew up in Atlanta, but at the time, Atlanta was not this beacon of a production.
Yeah, it's not Hollywood East.
No, it was, of course, Savannah was always a high profile location, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, Forrest Gump, like those types of projects. And, like Manhunter, shot in at the High Museum in the city. But it wasn't like it is now. And so I did a lot of stage. I did a lot of theater while studying film, like as a fan. And then when I got to college, I did do my first year of college at Marymount Manhattan in New York, but I was not accepted into the acting program. And so, and in fact, I took the only acting class that was offered to non-majors. And one time my professor asked me to stay after, and he was like, "Do you know that we have an acting major here?" And I was like, "I do know that. I did not get in." And he was like, "Did they tell you why?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, if you wanted to re-audition, I will help you with your audition." But I didn't love living in New York. And so I went back to Atlanta, and my mom kind of just said, "Look, just enroll at Georgia State University," which is in downtown Atlanta. And at the time, we had this scholarship called the Hope Scholarship, where if you maintained a B average or above, you could go to college for free. And so my mom was like, "Just enroll and we can figure out a film school. We can go wherever you want, but don't fall behind." And I ended up staying at Georgia State because they had this wonderful program where essentially just fill these requirements and you can essentially build your own. I built my own film school. So I studied a lot of theory and focused on political commentary and horror and science fiction. And then I was a women's studies minor, all while doing live theater and working as an actor, a professional actor in town.
Right. So that's fascinating. So you were aware, you were aware of everything beyond acting. You were aware of because not everyone thinks about what's going on behind the camera.
Right.
And I have to admit, the women's studies minor is fantastic to hear too.
Yeah. Well, you've seen my film.
Yeah.
So I would argue that everything I just said is all rolled into this movie, the political commentary and horror and science fiction with a women's studies minor is kind of the through line of a shining example.
Well, I love the amount of horror that we get from female filmmakers now. And with apologies to the aggrieved male filmmaker who every once in a while sends an email to us, I'm like, show us a story we haven't seen before. Show us a perspective we haven't seen before. And you know what? Right now, maybe female filmmakers have a slight edge over you because they've been shut out of the entire horror history. I mean, the history of horror, Hollywood in general has been pretty awful. But horror, it was just the scream queen. There was no role for a woman besides.
Especially behind the scenes.
Yeah. Especially behind the scenes. But even on camera.
Right.
Can't. Just victims. And so it's just such a fresh perspective.
I'm glad to
and
hear
knock
that.
on wood, when people who are young today are older, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, we've been seeing female horror for a long time." But for now, and by the way, I felt like this is totally not quite a tangent, but you said, your film wasn't horror enough for some horror festivals. And I love a quote from a friend of mine who stated when someone was trying to say that Get Out wasn't horror.
Right.
And he said, "It's not horror to you."
Right.
But your film is a horror film.
Of course. It's The Shining.
Someone who doesn't consider it horror is ignoring what your character is going through.
And also, part of the bone I have to pick with Stanley Kubrick, to be honest with you, is I understand why The Shining is so scary for so many people because they are afraid of their fathers. I mean, that's what this is. Jack's an alcoholic. Jack is unhinged. And that absolutely, that imagery is terrifying for a lot of people, especially that movie comes out in 1980. You know, the dads that I grew up with a dad complete opposite, you know, like I grew up with such a great dad, you know, and not a scary dad, but that's not the relationship that a lot of people have to their father. So that's the type of, so of course, that version and of the violence that Jack is enacting or capable of, or the madness that Jack is able of.
Yeah, it's actually
enacting.
a mental illness film.
Exactly, and so that is probably scary to a larger swath of people for deeper personal reasons than perhaps their mother, who is annoyed and frustrated and creatively, about to snap. And so I'm very aware of that, certainly. But I kind of wanted to, and also, look, I wanted to explore. It's not just for your audience, and again, I hope they get to see the film sooner rather than later, but it's not a one-to-one. It's not like a Lady Jack Torrance, but the question in my mind when I was writing it was, what does this look like if a mother is in this position? And moving to a new house and we're moving here for my career so I can do the thing I am supposed to do. And we have this small child and I have an annoying partner who happens to be a husband versus an annoying wife, right? And what does that version of the broad strokes of The Shining look like? And so that was sort of that approach.
And I can tell you, that my wife, when I told her, I always tell her, she always asks, I go, there's a podcast tomorrow. So, be aware when you come home from tennis, you don't make too much noise.
Sure.
But actually I kind of enjoy it when she walks by.
Sure.
I said, I just said, it's Clarke. That's the person who made the film where the mother was a TV writer and the husband would leave her alone. Oh, well, no, I don't have to worry about spoilers because you're comparing it to The Shining.
Yes.
And yeah, goes on a murder spree of sorts. So, and she was like, oh my God, I love that film. Like, it's memorable. And I will tell you that as a mother, she loved your film because women, you're a women's studies major, so now I'm just
please.
I'm just virtue signaling.
No.
But women are always the only bad women, and as a step parent, it always upsets the shit out of me. But right, in popular culture, the mother always has to be a saint and perfect, and it makes every actual mom in our culture feel like they're not living up to that ideal.
Yes.
And stepmothers are the only ones allowed to be evil, and they can't be good for some reason.
Right.
And so the fact that, as a mom who has probably thought about, just maybe not murdering everyone in her family, but definitely getting in a car and driving away and never seeing that child or husband again.
Yeah.
She loved your film.
Well, I really appreciate that because, I like to make, it's interesting. Right now I'm in the process of trying to raise money for my slate, which is a different kind of take. It's not one project. It's like there's a couple. And I've thought a lot about what's my pitch, and I kind of feel like it's a little delicate because I don't want to say I make horror movies for women because that is automatically, it's Lifetime. That's Lifetime, which, by the way, no disrespect to Lifetime. I would love to direct a Lifetime movie. I am in a Lifetime movie. It's called Psycho Storm Chaser. No big deal. And it was one of the most fun. I love all forms of genre storytelling, but there is a negative connotation where I'm like, no, I make horror movies for ladies. And it's like, that's not for me. I actually was just having this conversation, but two things. So that said, though, what I mean by that is I'm making horror movies that are inviting women into the conversation. So, for instance, the first short film that I ever directed, which was really more of an exercise, it's just two oneers, and they're on a Skype call, and then there's a scare at the end. It's very simple, but it's two sisters who are fighting at the center of the story. And I had a girlfriend, so I put it up on YouTube, and I had a girlfriend who reached out to me, and she was like, I don't like horror movies. I watched this because you shared it. And first of all, I really liked this. And second of all, I loved that it was two sisters at the center of the story. And the same with A Shining Example. I feel like people who are not movie people or horror people, especially women, have watched this short and they've come to me after and they've been like, I don't like horror movies, and I don't even like really movies. I don't care. They're whatever, but I really liked this. And meanwhile, there are a lot of men in the audience who are laughing their asses off and they get it and they think it's funny. So it's really just more about inviting women into the conversation, or the experience rather. Like just to be like, oh, I actually liked that. And I'm like, great, that makes me so happy. And
I'm not trying to correct, but I'm trying to what you're really doing is you're making horror for everyone.
Exactly.
Right? You're making it for everyone.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of horror, well, it's certainly better now. It's so much better now. I grew up in the 80s, so horror was not for everyone. It was really made for teenage boys, and they figured teenage girls would be pulled into the theater by the boys. Right. And they didn't give two shits that they were just, exploiting topless girls in the film. And then I would love to interview women my generation. In fact, my winter formal date in 1985 is a women's studies professor.
Oh.
At a respected university. I would love to actually talk to her about what was it like watching horror when we were, because there would be like slumber parties in high school, and you'd watch some dumb movie like that.
Yep.
That was totally made by immature men for adolescent boys.
Sure. And
I wonder what it was like to sit there and, it was like the fish in the water. Like that was, I bet my female friends were sitting there watching the horror of the 80s going, well, I mean, of course, like I don't expect the women to be anything but topless victims. Right. But in retrospect, how cool it would have been if the power drawer was held by a woman just once.
And I do think that there is a bit of a reclaiming of the final girl. There are a lot of survivors who look at the final girls of the slasher movies of the 80s and find strength and power. Jamie Lee Curtis being on this Halloween 2018 press tour for the last however many years, because they made 3 movies. There were always people at Comic-Cons or whatever that would stand up and say, because of how Laurie fought back, I actually fought back against an attacker, and you saved my life, or this character saved my life. And there are so many queer folks who have gone and found so much empowerment in the final girls, especially of the 80s. So, I think there's it's just a complicated legacy, really, but I do think it's not, and I think preference is okay. You're allowed to have a preference of, for instance, I just did an interview talking about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, which I like the best of the big slasher movies for that reason, because Nancy is so smart and proactive, and because the kids are real, and because, it feels like there's a little bit more dimension to the characters and they're not disposable. And for me, Halloween is Laurie. If we don't have Jamie Lee Curtis, then it's harder for me to connect with those movies. And same with, I've never been a big Friday the 13th fan, but what I do appreciate is the artistry that goes into the craft of the special effects. Some of those special effects are groundbreaking. They're fascinating, and it's okay to have exploitation cinema. But just because it's something that I'm like, okay, I appreciate it and I recognize it, but it's not necessarily my preference. And I'm sure there are a lot of audience members who have felt that way with the genre, over the entire history of the horror genre.
Yeah, in fact, I never considered myself a horror fan because horror was so redundant and uncreative in the 80s.
Yes, the slasher boom definitely
killed it. Yes. It killed it. The success of those early inventive films, it just turned into just crap. But actually, our daughter came home from a slumber party at age 13, which was almost 5 years ago, and said, I only watch horror films now. So now every Friday and Saturday, I said, well, we can't watch horror 7 nights a week. But every Friday night during COVID, we would watch a horror film.
Love it.
And she I learned, and then, you watch enough demonic possession films with a kid who's been raised without religion, you go, okay, you have to understand demonic possession now. So we are going back to The Exorcist.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And all that. And then funny thing is we would go back to those 80s films like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes.
And I'd be sitting there going, wow, it's pretty boring. It doesn't hold up. And then the film ends, she goes, that was really good.
Yeah.
And it's probably the stuff you're talking about with the teenagers.
Yes, exactly. And you know, we could record a whole other side quest about Wes Craven. He is my favorite of the horror auteurs, but he also was a college professor. He was very cerebral. He was very philosophical. And listen, Wes made some schlock, like absolutely. And he made some stuff where I'm like, oh boy, like facepalm. But he also was a real proponent of talking about violence with intention, you know, especially during the 70s and 80s and the 90s when, you know, parents groups and mothers against this and blah, blah, blah. You know, Wes got a lot of flack, and Wes would always say, like, if there's violence in my movie, it's for a reason. And you know, and again, he was a very cerebral filmmaker. There's a lot of, we could go on a whole side quest.
Well, and I was going to say that's probably a big part of why Shining Example resonates for non-horror people.
Yes.
Because the non-horror element of the story of a woman also dealing with a not so great boss.
Yeah.
And just the family dynamic.
Yes.
All that communicates to the, you know, it's not just about jump scares. That's the wonderful thing now, right? Is you can have an interesting film with some jump scares or with some creepiness. Yeah. Like the genre's just blown wide open now, which is so healthy.
Well, and I loved what you said earlier about I don't really identify as a horror fan, but that's the thing that so many people say. And yet the horror movies that cross over into the mainstream, everyone has seen. Everyone loves. The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, even The Conjuring. I mean, gosh, these movies have made billions of dollars.
Well, and Get Out.
I mean, the list really does go on and on. You can say, some people go, oh, I don't like horror movies. And you go, oh, well, everybody remembers where they were when they saw The Exorcist. Everybody remembers where they were when they saw Scream for the first time. Everybody, and Get Out. And it just, honestly, this conversation can go on, you know, stretch throughout time. Night of the Living Dead, you know, George Romero's, like, just, again, Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, the horror movies that break through, there is something universal. And that is what I am really interested in. And that is what was the biggest compliment to me with A Shining Example was breaking through to people who go, I don't usually like these movies, but I loved yours. And I'm like, that makes me thrilled.
Because you made a great film. In the end, you made a great film.
Yeah.
Not a great horror film, a great film that is also a great horror film, but it's also a great comedy. And it's also a great allegory for women's roles in society. Yes. I mean, like, I tend to do that. I tend to expand it.
Yeah.
But it should be expanded. Because that's what cinema is I always say this, that nowadays cinema is the campfire. Like, we human beings used to sit around a campfire and share their stories of the day.
Yes.
And now we have no public spaces whatsoever.
True.
So it really is cinema and TV.
Yeah.
Is our campfire where we get to share, like, what we think of what's going on. And A Shining Example is one of those films that I would find it. Yeah, I would bet that we could just show it to people who have very little interest in horror or film, and neither say anyone who's a mother would identify.
I hope so. I hope that's the case, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think I totally blew it on your biography, though. What? So, because I didn't find, like, clearly some films came in between, like you moving, like, I only know that you graduated in Atlanta.
Yes.
From Georgia State.
Yes.
And, like, you
came straight to LA.
Came straight to LA.
Yes.
Straight to LA. Were you still thinking about getting behind the camera
No.
So it was solely in front of the camera at first.
I always had in my mind a producerial role. Sandra Bullock is a huge role model for me. She has always been somebody who I really admire and respect. And her company, Fortis Films, she was producing movies before every actress had a production company. And she was a real producer. And so that was where my head was at. More of like, I would like to be in a position where I am an actress and producer. And then over time, I started writing more. And I wrote, the first feature that I wrote was a holiday rom-com. So not horror at all. But I'm so happy that was the first thing I ever wrote because it just came out of me. And because the stories I'm interested in telling are honestly stories you've seen before, but not by me. And so the rom-com that I wrote was called Merry Christmaka. It's about a Jewish girl who goes home to the Midwest with her boyfriend for Christmas to meet his family. And, she's also like, she grew up with a multi-denominational family. And so it's not like, she was not in temple every week. She's very secular. But being in the Midwest and meeting this family for the first time, they're all, tell us about Hanukkah. And she's like, oh, I don't know. Like, truly, I don't know. We just did it every December. And I don't know. I'm not super religious, but coming to terms with like that fish out of water element and also these dynamics. So that's a holiday rom-com. It's a Christmas movie. It is a Christmas movie that has Hanukkah in it. And so, but it came out. I knew the tropes. I was able to hit that 90-page, 89-page count so easily. And so that really kind of showed me, oh, wait a minute, this is fun. I actually like this. And I think I'm writing things that are commercial. So so then that led to writing a slasher movie that I actually would love to be a directorial debut, like a feature debut. I would really, really love to direct this movie. But yeah, and so on and so on. So that's where the writing came from. And then with the directing, a producer friend of mine, who is also a director, I went to him and I was like, okay, I need to play a role like in A Shining Example. I kind of was like, here's my idea, because as an actress, I'm at the age where now I read for moms. And so I thought to myself, well, what kind of mom would I want to play? And truly, that is where the idea came from. Like, okay, well, if I'm going to play a mom, let's do it my way. And so I went to my friend who is a director, and he has directed me in things before. And I was like, I want you to direct this. And he was like, okay, love this idea, and I'll help you produce it. But actually, I think you should direct this. And he had helped me with the little short I had mentioned about the sisters. His wife and I played the sisters. So anyway, I said, thank you for being an ally. Thank you for being an advocate. I understand what you're doing. I very much appreciate it. I don't want to direct this. And he was like, okay, cool, but I actually think you should. And so I went home, and the final image of the film, which is the shadow of the murder and the eyes, came to me immediately. And that's when I went, oh, maybe I could direct this. And then I had the totally unnatural experience of the company that financed the film. They knew that they were financing it, but they didn't really care. They were so checked out. The money was spent elsewhere, and we got to make short films. It was a crazy story that never happens. So I had the thing that filmmakers never have, which is complete creative control. Creative control
and the money didn't come out of your pocket.
Correct. And a little bit of money. That's
right. Is amazing. That is. But it's also, all right, so when you were hesitant to direct, was it because you knew you were going to play the mom and you thought maybe that would be too much to be directing and be the lead? It was more that I was nervous about the logistics. And I think too, when we did the first short that I mentioned was called Say Something. That is literally 2 iPhones.
I don't have to worry about lenses. The whole point of that was an exercise, and it's not meant to be like, there's supposed to be no budget. That was the point. And so if we were I was talking about actually putting money into this before the opportunity to get the movie made like actually came up. And so I was like, you know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm happy to take a producerial role, and I'm happy because I don't know what I'm doing with a crew. I don't know what I'm doing with lenses. I don't know what I'm doing with like all of this. I know how to talk about filmmaking. I know what shots I want. I can give you comps. I can give you tone. Like I can direct this movie, but I don't know the tech part. And that was the reservation.
Gotcha. But you went home and you immediately started visualizing.
Yes.
And then you either realized or someone shared with you that you don't need that technical knowledge.
Yes.
You just need a cinematographer who respects you, a crew that
yes.
you were picking your own crew, I assume. So you all of a sudden you can just say, I want this look, and the person's like, oh, I know what lens you need.
Exactly. And Zach Voitis was my DP on A Shining Example, and I truly want to work with him on everything that we do. He really understood like the position that I was in, but also he speaks movie. That's sort of how my producer Buzz Wallach and I talk about it, was like, we like to work with people who speak movie. And so if I tell, Zach, think of, the shadow play in like Stephen Sommers' The Mummy when they're assassinating Imhotep in the opening scene. He's like, I know what that is. And that was like the idea. Or there was actually a great werewolf transformation in Werewolf by Night, the Marvel film, that is a lot done in shadow, and then it pushes in on eyes, and you see the reaction of what is happening. And so that, there were these visual references. And even on set, there was a moment where something wasn't working or whatever, and Zach said to me, well, what if I do this, and that'll give you that Sam Raimi thing you like? And I was like, great, go do that. And so that's the type of that he made my life so easy, and he was very teachable too. Like when we did our walkthrough, he had this app on his phone, and he's like, this is what it's going to look like with this lens. Do you like this? Like, here's another option. But it was never condescending. It was like, no, let me tell you, and then you decide, and then I'm going to go knock it out of the park. And I was like, this is incredible. And then Buzz, having directed me, served as my AD, and so we have a relationship where I was comfortable with him being like, maybe do one more, or he would film monitor and then run over to me, and I would just scrub through it and be like, okay, yes, we can move on, or oh no, we need one more. So like these two assets on that set are what made me go, oh, okay, you're right. I just need to find the people that
right. And before you even got there, you knew with those people backing you up, you could kick some ass. I
was so spoiled. All I had to do was be creative. Like truly, like they made my life so easy. And I fully recognize that this is not how this normally goes. And for the last 2 years, like I have really been feeling that, trying to get things off the ground, trying to find financing, trying to get a meeting, trying to get people to, the way our industry is contracted, there are just so few opportunities for people in my position who, I am a professional actor. I've been on many, and as a entertainment personality, I've been on every major movie set you can think of. I've been on Matt Reeves sets. I've been on James Wan sets. I've been on huge. So I have all of this perspective being on set, and I have directed 2 things, and one of them did win a couple of awards, and I'm confident in that. So I'm in the position where like maybe a CW show would be next for me. Or maybe maybe a small indie for a company that wants to put out, or maybe a Tubi original would be next for me, or a Lifetime original. But unfortunately, right now, everything is just like, it just feels so contracted.
Yeah, and most places don't know what they want. Although, like when you mentioned Tubi, I'm sure. But I bet what Tubi wants, and this is like an educated guess, is they want you to make that indie horror film and then bring it to them.
Yeah.
They don't want to fund it because everyone's bringing them indie horror films all the time. So they're kind of spoiled.
Well, I don't want to speak out of school, but in 2023, I had a meeting with them. And at that time, they were making 100 movies a year. They were just knocking them out. And I was like, what a perfect opportunity for me to be a part of this machine. I love that. And also, it's not like Blumhouse gave me $3 million and then my movie doesn't open and then I am in director's jail forever. It's like that conversation with Tubi was actually, and they were looking for more female directors in the thriller space. So I pitched them a bunch of ideas. I watched a bunch of their movies, and actually I liked quite a lot of them despite their silly titles. And I'm not saying that to be condescending, but like they know their titles are silly, and they know that sometimes the titles are silly, like, and they're like, wow, this movie is actually really good. And if this movie didn't have a silly title, more people would probably watch it, and it might actually get a little more respect. But unfortunately, post strikes, you know, and to use Tubi as the example, they are owned by Fox. And then there's this whole thing about that whole thing that I was interviewing to be a part of, frankly, just doesn't exist anymore, which is a bummer. You know, it's a real bummer, because for people like me, what a great, like, that should be the next step, you know?
It should be. Although you do have one advantage as a horror fan, right? Because if someone was a pure drama fan,
yes,
it's a harder, right?
Right.
Whereas you should be able to get the funding for, you know, if you came up with an indie feature horror film that, honestly, a shining example, but you break the 80-minute point. Yeah. if it's that quality, then the wonderful thing is that there is a market for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just about finding the people who are ready to like release the funds.
Exactly, because no one wants to do that part. Exactly.
And it's you know, I just got to find some like oil tycoon somewhere who just is like, "Oh yeah, I've got a couple $1 million to invest in something that might not make its money back, but it also might, because it is a, you know.
It has its best chance to.
Yeah, that is correct. And that is what I'm currently doing as I'm trying to find slate financing.
Pitching, you're like saying, look at the history of horror that breaks through. Like, if there was ever it is the genre that can break through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is, you know, and I say that, you know, it's almost bittersweet for me as someone who loves all genres.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, well, my Tubi story is like this podcast actually led to a TV series.
Oh, cool.
And we were just putting together everyone's short films, because all the people on this podcast who had a feature got to streaming, and all the people with a short didn't. And I was like, well, the first 25 people done the podcast who had shorts, I was like, you want to put all these shorts together? And because I'd learned from people about Amazon Prime Video Direct. Yeah. So we did it. And we started getting a lot of viewership. By the third season, we were at like 10,000 people a week, unique viewers. And it kept going. Then Amazon did their indie purge and said, you have to charge 99 cents an episode. And you can imagine you go from like 10,000 a week to under 100 a week.
Yes.
Overnight.
Yes.
But when that happened, one of our board members put me in touch with someone at Tubi. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I got this series. We got up to 10,000 unique viewers a week, and it was growing. I know people will like this stuff. He said, oh, that sounds really cool. What percentage is horror? And I was like, well, of our first 150 films, there's 3. And he went, no. Well, if they were all horror shorts, I wouldn't hesitate.
Wow.
And I was like, but look, the numbers were going up. Wow. Like if it's on there, people will watch good indie shorts. Yeah. Like they don't even know these things exist.
Right.
Like if you're not on the festival circuit, you don't realize how good the independently made shorts are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think the most wild thing is like we have all these means of distribution, but nobody's. It's so many means of distribution that it's too many means of distribution.
And curation is the key.
Yes,
but I don't understand. I still think the sort of HBO brand had some decent curation, but the rest. There's, you know, I mean, fine, I'm a cinephile and film snob, like, you know, but when I see, honestly, I'll just say it. When you talked about your rom-com script with Chrismica in it, I was like, Jesus Christ, that'd be so much better than that awful Netflix show about dating a rabbi. Because as a non-practicing born Jew who's basically like got almost no connection to it, I was offended by the fact that I was offended. I'm like, how can you make me offended when I don't even feel obviously you can never sever your youth from it. Right. But I was like, how dare you make me get mad about the misrepresentation. That rabbi would not do any of that. Come on. And then you read that like the real story it was just a non-religious guy she was dating. Just make it a non-religious Jewish guy. Just stop pretending that you could have that relationship with an actual rabbi.
Gosh, I still
pissed me off so bad.
I love Adam Brody and Kristen Bell, so I do want to watch the show, but I haven't watched it yet.
Well, I just spoiled it, but
but
they are wonderful.
Yeah.
And I could watch them make out. Like I should just like download it somehow, and like their chemistry is on fire.
That's great.
It's so believable. But then it's just I can't handle the way it gets religion so wrong. I'm like, leave religion out of your stuff unless you do it right.
Sure,
like,
that's fair.
Pay respect. Yeah. I don't know. It's a tangent, but I couldn't help but think that yours is a better idea.
And well, it's so funny. This is another tangent, but I'll be brief. But I mean, on the one hand, Hallmark generating 300 Christmas movies a year is incredible. Right? I mean, how wonderful. And the fact that people watch them and people are getting movies made. But if you break with the formula, it's not a Hallmark movie. And then in my experience, when I go to people and I say, this is not a Hallmark movie, and then they read it and they come back and they say, but this isn't a Hallmark movie. And I'm like, I know. And they say, well, I can't sell this. If I invest in it and I make it, because so many of those are negative pickups, then it's like, because it's not Hallmark. And so you're like, okay, well, all these streamers, are having but they all have their mandates. And so like, I remember years ago when I pitched it to Netflix, a guy read it and he was like, actually, this is very similar to the story of me and my girlfriend, except I am the Jewish one and she is, and I went home to her Midwestern family. But right now, Netflix's mandate is like, it has to be aspirational. Like she becomes a princess in the end, which fine. But like, again, I feel like something like Merry Christmas is something that is a PG-13 movie that people will watch or would watch, but it's not quite Hallmark, but it could live on any streamer, It's just a matter of getting someone to release those funds.
That title alone would actually make it a success, I think, on streaming. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, I'm one of those I kind of believe in titles. Like,
titles are hard, too.
But titles are huge.
Yes, they are.
Like, the one place they don't matter is the festival circuit. But believe me, when I'm watching these submissions, like, when I see the title, if it's in a bad font or if it's a bad title, I know it's not going to be that good a film because they didn't put enough thought into that.
Yep.
But I was going to add, so here's going back to the Sandra Bullock mention. Yes. You're in the unfortunate position of being an intelligent person who thinks like she does, because every one of her films that she's produced has been a recognizable genre with a fresh twist, whether it was Miss Congeniality, where she got to play, the hardened FBI agent, whether it was
2 Weeks Notice.
2 Weeks Notice. Was that the one with Ryan Reynolds?
That one's Hugh Grant. The Proposal.
Yes,
love that older woman.
Female boss.
Yes.
The story we've seen before,
love.
But she twists it.
Yes.
And it's with her star power that I guess she's probably able to present recognizable genres with a fresh and modern twist.
Yes.
And people are looking at your fresh and modern twist and going, well, that doesn't always work. And the truth is, every time you give the public a fresh twist on something they know, they're happy.
Yes, that is agreed.
And so all the stupid rules,
I just feel like there's maybe one little missing piece. I just got to find that one little missing piece. And I'll be honest with you, when I started the festival run with A Shining Example, and I was focusing on women's festivals, I was hopeful that I would meet somebody who was a producer, who was like, okay, because I thought I could probably convince a female producer to give me $1 million to make a genre film faster than any of the horror bros that I know. You know what I'm saying? And I know a lot. I know all those guys. But the horror world is small. And by the way, it's no disrespect to them. It's just the way that people read and they, you know, what sparks an interest in them is personal, and they would argue it's market driven, and I would argue yes, but also it's your lens that drives the market, and now we have a fish or the snake eating its tail. So I was really hopeful that I would maybe meet a woman on the festival circuit that I could kind of really like, but it just didn't happen. Which, you know, that's fine. Last year was a tough year for festivals. I mean, everyone was exhausted just post-strike and with everything going on. And so, and frankly, everyone's just trying to get their damn thing across the finish line. We're all in this, a lot of us are in this position, you know? So, but maybe I'll find somebody. That's what I think I need, is just that advocate. That's the biggest thing that I feel like I'm missing right now.
I mean, I feel like the world needs a company like Blumhouse with someone a little, I mean, I'm actually avoiding saying a woman who runs a Blumhouse, who is aware of all the market forces, but also understands that just because it doesn't click with your brain immediately, well, I'm just saying,
yes.
I guess I'm implying that Blum, or whoever's making the decisions at Blumhouse, you can't avoid your bias.
Absolutely.
And just to have a horror-centric production company with a female bias would be a nice change, and I bet everything out of there would be better. But like I can't name the director, but that Fear Street trilogy on
Lee
Netflix,
Janiak.
Wonderfully, perfectly directed.
Agreed.
Fantastic work, and female-led.
Yes, absolutely.
And it didn't matter that it was female-led. We just enjoyed it as a family with a horror-obsessed team that brilliantly went through the history of horror, did 3 very different films as part of it. I thought it was brilliant. And I don't think a guy would have come up with it.
I have no idea who greenlit. Well, I do know. I think Sony did, and then they sold it to Netflix, which was such a great home. I'm so happy that the Fear Street trilogy ended up being on streaming, and Netflix just built their summer around it. Like, how perfect. Because that is the other thing. A lot of this stuff is, how are you going to get the product or the project out there? And if you get it set up in a way that is set up to fail, it is just like the person who is the director, it's going to wear that responsibility, no matter their gender, is going to wear that forever. They're going to go to director's jail. When like the example I always give is, have you seen the Lonely Island movie Pop Star with? I
didn't, but okay. I'm aware. Yeah, well, Adam Sandberg's Pop Star.
Andy Samberg, Jorma Taccone, and Akiva Schaffer. Anyway. That movie, it was a Universal wide release. I believe it came out in 2017, but I did the junket. I went to New York. I did the junket. I'm sitting in the theater watching the screening, and I was like, this movie's incredible. It is so funny, and the music is insane. But I also remember thinking, this is going to crash and burn in the theaters. No one is going to show up to make this a success. But if this had been a Netflix release, and again, let's keep in mind it was 2017, I think, summer 20s, it would be the biggest movie of the summer. So that was a huge crystallizing moment of like, gosh, it really does matter how and when your thing gets out there.
Is it because he just doesn't have a big enough name to get the audience in the seats?
I think it's really hard to, I think we've seen, especially with comedy, like Barbie, I think, was obviously a huge success, and I love Barbie. Barbie, I don't think a lot of people talk about like it's a comedy, which it is a comedy. But I think when people think comedy, they think Judd, or they think they think Will Ferrell, or they think that. I think what prevented Popstar from blowing up was it's just really hard to get people into a theater for an R-rated comedy. And that is the long and short of it. Now with streaming, with word of mouth,
yeah, honestly, so I'm too old to be into the Andy Samberg thing, but I'm aware of him, and like I saw Palm Springs on streaming, and I was like, holy shit, this is fantastic. Like it was much, because I probably didn't go see Popstar because I don't like pop music.
Yes.
And I was like, well, it's just not going to
This
be
is
for
not for
me.
me.
I
Yeah.
didn't see Hot Rod either, even though I heard Hot Rod was hilarious.
I mean, I love it, but that might not be for you. I love Hot Rod.
It might be for me. I grew up with Super Dave Osborne, right?
knows?
But it actually did take it to be on streaming for me to watch one of his films.
Yeah. Well, Popstar is one that I would feel very comfortable recommending to anyone, any cinephile. It's the same with with horror. This is the same thing. Like, I try to be very mindful of, okay, my fandom, my appreciation of the genre versus what would I recommend to just anybody. And Popstar is something for you, for your listeners. If you like comedy, I promise you, it is a great movie. It's a really great mockumentary. It's a great movie. It's a great commentary on the industry. The music is awesome. So highly, highly recommend.
Well, excellent. Well, and you have because of your role on the as an interviewer
Yes.
and entertainment reporter of
Yes,
sorts.
yes.
So you have all this extra insight. It's kind of impressive that you sat there and said, "This is wonderful, and it's not going to be huge."
Right.
Like so. Do you kind of see that like at the script level too?
Sometimes I get it right, and sometimes I get it very wrong. I got to see Adam Wingard's movie, The Woods, which turned out to be a the Blair Witch sort of reboot. And they did this big reveal at Comic-Con, and then it took like 3 weeks for the movie to actually come out. And I was like, well, that was a mistake. But I saw an early screening of it when it was still The Woods and nobody knew that it was Blair Witch. And I watched it in a screening room in advance of Comic-Con, and I thought to myself, this is going to be huge. Horror fans are going to love this. And it crashed and burned. Then, a couple months later, I got to see an early screening of It Chapter 1 with not even finished effects. And I walked out of there going, this is going to be huge. But also, I was so wrong the last time. And then it turned out to be huge. So, again, who can say? But yeah, I do think what I think I can recognize, like for instance, Anthony de Blasi, who directed Malum, which is a movie that I was in, who I love. He's a protege of Clive Barker. He's directed a bunch of cool things. He and his wife, Natalie, wrote this spec that they sent to me just for feedback, like as a writer. And I was like, okay, my goal is to become famous enough to attach myself to get this made because I loved the script and I loved the part. But one of the things that I did feel like with my sort of entertainment host, like it's my job to kind of keep up with trends and stuff like that, is it felt very much in the Smile universe or like the sort of gamified genre universe, which is a good thing right now. But it felt very much its own thing. And because Anthony has directed me in something, I was able to read it and be like, oh, this is so him. So it stayed true to who he was, but also I'm like, do these revisions and get this out there because I feel this is exactly what I'm seeing in, X, Y, and Z, and the market allegedly wants that. So get it out there, So that's the type of stuff that I think I can bring to the table. It's like, okay, I saw this here, I saw that there, in that way.
And it sounds like you're aware that people have to move fast.
Yes.
Because what's hot
Truly, oh my God.
lasts for weeks, maybe a few months. They're like the windows are so tiny, which I guess so do you have I'm already assuming you're going to say yes, but do you have your a deck of sorts where you have like all these ideas to pitch?
Yes.
And you can cover. Have you written it? Have you written it out so that you're like, here's the rom-com, here's the this, here's that, like whatever genre, like pick your genre, I can do it.
Yeah, so yes is the answer. My sweet dad, I was on the phone. My dad's a criminal defense attorney, so he's not in the industry, but I was on the phone with him, especially to be completely vulnerable for a minute during the fires here in Los Angeles. And I was just in tears because I was like, first of all, this is devastating for this city. The city's been going through so much in terms of the unhoused population, in terms of building, in terms of finances. It's such a tough time. But on top of that, during the writers and actor strikes, which I support and am so there's no but here. Like they needed to happen. I believe they needed to happen. But as a result, the industry kind of took that as an opportunity to just shut down and say, well, we've got content for days, so maybe we don't make things. So I was on the phone with and so I think we were all very hopeful that 2025, business people might have felt more comfortable opening their coffers a little bit. Zaslav was talking about consolidation. Everybody, but maybe they were going to start spending more. And then the fires happened. And I just was in tears talking to my dad, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I am almost out of money. Like I don't know who else to ask. I don't, and so
right, because the hosting stuff
it doesn't exist
got
anymore.
wiped out by freebies off of YouTube.
It's all influencer based, which is fine. They've found a way to monetize it. I just am from a little bit of a different school, so like I've tried to figure that out, but it's hard. It's hard, and the algorithms and the whole deal. I'm not complaining.
And do you have like more assumptions? Did you not pursue the influencer thing when you were on TV and such? Because you have integrity?
No, it was more that...
Because you probably could have pursued it and interacted. I don't know.
I think for me, COVID really kind of made me feel like I was in a position where I was working with AMC Networks, and I had a really great job, a steady job hosting Twitch content for them. And that was arguably the best job I've ever had. But I also COVID was hard, and I didn't want, honestly, we were home. I didn't want to be putting on makeup to sit at home. You know what I mean? And like, so I was doing this job, and I was focusing on social less. And then in 2022, December 2022, when our AMC show and our channel kind of came to a close, I had built up this little nest egg, and I had the rights. I have, for a couple more months, the rights to a novel, and I've adapted it into a feature. And it's something that I believe is like, again, it's exemplary of what I want my company to be. And so I was like, okay, I want to take some time. I'll still engage in social media, of course, but like I'm not turning anything down. But also I'm going to take some time and focus on writing this script. And I had just shot A Shining Example, and I felt very good about it. And then the strikes happened. And then it was like, okay, what do I do? I'm a SAG actor. I can't get on the internet and promote or talk about or review movies and TV shows. And so then that all thawed out, or it ended. But then here comes 2024, and I've missed the boat on TikTok. And you know what I'm saying? It just was like a circumstances. It just kind of was a culmination of I didn't see. I just missed a couple things. So my dad's helping me fundraise is the point of this, because he was like, okay, well, let's think about resources. Let's think about outside of the industry box. Like, who do I know through being a lawyer that we could go to and we could potentially fundraise? So to answer your question, my laptop is in this bag right now, and I am finishing my deck this week. But actually, Chrismica is actually at the end of the list, because I've had it happen where like a manager read Chrismica, but they know me from horror, and he was like, "Well, I was just expecting something like Get Out to happen," and I was like, "That's no." So it's like you got to kind of focus a little bit,
But it sounds promising to me, because especially if you go the horror route and you find 10, 15 lawyers who can let go 10,000.
Yes, exactly.
Believe me, I wish I was the kind of person, but I'm aware that there are people who can.
Yeah, there are people who can.
It's tricky.
Yeah, but we're just all having to get creative and clever and creative. But it's it's a really tough time right now, just in general. And then, of course, we have all the macro changes that are going on. And frankly, whatever one's politics are, the changes are drastic. We're recording this as the Treasury and the finance, we're recording this when a lot of really kind of
we're
alarming
in week 3 of a new administration.
Yeah.
You and I probably agree on politics, but
I know a lot of people across the spectrum are kind of looking at what Elon Musk is doing right now with downloading all of our social security numbers on a private server and going, excuse me? And a lot of, it doesn't matter your politics. They go, no, that's not, but it's happened. So what does happen to our money? I don't know. we'll find out.
I can tell you that anti-totalitarian horror will have a home in 2027.
Yeah, right.
I don't know when it'll
we'll
be,
see.
but it is. It's so tough.
Yeah.
But I know it's such a weird time.
Yeah.
And yeah, but people still need that campfire.
They do.
And it's not going to be anything but film.
Yeah.
Although series are huge.
I love a series.
You developing those too? Or?
I have a pilot, one show in particular that I love this pilot. It's not 100% done yet, but I think it's fun. And I think it's spooky, but it's a procedural, so it's definitely palatable.
Seems like the ghost thing will never go away.
No, it won't. It won't. And yeah, so that one's fun. But yeah, and then I just read this book that I would love to find a way to turn into a series because I see it. But the author actually spoke to my book club and he was like, yeah, someone very famous, a great filmmaker had it at a streamer as a series, and it was just so expensive, or maybe as a feature, and it was just so expensive because it takes place in like a mountain climate. But it is a series. I mean, it is just, I see it. So who knows? Maybe not to be big for my britches, but we got to like dream big, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And be versatile.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you got the versatility going on. Yeah. Excellent. Well, so anything else that you want to bring up before we wrap it up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'll just say that, I do believe A Shining Example is going to be on streaming in 2025, so stay tuned for that. But Malum, who directed by Anthony de Blasi, which I mentioned, it's a reimagining of his sort of cult favorite horror movie called The Last Shift. So he was given a much bigger budget to reimagine it, and he did some really cool stuff in it. And so that is on AMC Plus and Shudder in the United States, like you can stream it. And it had a theatrical release, but now it's on streaming. And anthology that I am in that I'm really, really proud of, and it is true independent filmmaking. It's called Tenants, and it will be on Tubi very soon.
Well, one thing is you can email me links, and there'll be clickable links in the show notes. And so that'll take people right to those things. Even if if the series comes a couple weeks later, whatever, it's fine. Whenever the link is there,
sure.
We can always change the show notes.
We can.
It's so convenient. It's just a blog post.
Just a blog.
Podcasting is still quite simple.
It is.
Thankfully, it was created as an open source thing,
yes.
So we can do what we need.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, I will wrap us up then.
Okay.
But where can people? Do you have ClarkeWolfe.com?
I do have ClarkeWolfe.com. I do. So yes, I mean, you are welcome to find me. I'm currently on Instagram and Blue Sky at Clarke Wolfe, Clarke with an E, Wolfe with an E. And I actually do a pop culture live stream twice a week on YouTube. So there's a Patreon that goes along with that, but the YouTube link is youtube.com/official Clarke Wolfe. So and I'm really hopeful that... so just you can tune in there. And
you got to we'll make all those clickable show notes because, that sounds good. I was about to mention something and I lost it.
Oh, no.
I lost it. No biggie.
Was it Blue Sky? Was it Instagram?
It was Blue Sky. You triggered me with Blue Sky.
What was it?
No, just that I chose to no longer open the apps that are owned by Meta.
Yeah.
And I only go there to share a graphic of like Chester the guinea pig, and I'm like, my most recent post is only on Blue Sky if you want to see. So I go to Instagram and I go, if you want to see me, I'm on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
And like I'm trying to just be Blue Sky only.
I get it. I don't like any of the Meta apps currently. I'll be completely honest, and I don't know what to do about that because, as we discussed, like so much of my hosting career is tied to
you can't
social
turn
media.
your back on it.
What do you do?
I can have other staff do the festival Instagram. But for me, I'll share something really exciting. And this is just personally excites me. I gave up Instagram. By the way, my Instagram was the algorithm is so addictive because they know I love bunny rabbits and guinea pigs and huskies and pigs. I love those little piglets and people. Yeah. So anyway, it was just crack crack for my brain. So I quit it because of the Joe Rogan interview.
Yep.
And I was like, I just don't want to, I don't want ads to scroll by me.
Yep.
And 3 or 4 days after not opening those apps anymore, something in my unconscious said, hey, remember that book you were going to read? And then last week I started it. I'm reading a book.
Great. We love books. Books are great.
Getting away from the algorithm. And I'm not talking about politics. I was just saying getting away from that addictive algorithm.
Yeah.
It was like giving up cigarettes and all of a sudden you go play tennis. Like, hey, I'm not coughing anymore.
Yes, I totally get it.
Everything is functioning better.
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing about Blue Sky is because it's also an open source thing and it's less... It is, you can actually tailor it so you only see your friends' posts and no sponsor content or blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So it just feels healthier.
Yeah.
And it's wild because I still have to, my best friend of 45 years still sends me funny videos on Instagram. So I just open Instagram, look at what he sends me, and then shut it before I start getting distracted.
Yep.
But it's a really unhealthy thing.
Yeah, I don't, it's not fun anymore.
It's not fun.
It's not fun anymore. None of it's fun anymore. I was just having this conversation on my live stream. I know we're wrapping up, but like professionally, Twitter, pre-2020, like it was such an awesome way to, if you were up and coming in a business, especially the entertainment industry, to connect with people you admire. Like I remember I would write a joke. If I wrote a joke and like Patton Oswalt liked it, I'd be like, whoa. Or I remember, we're not super close, but we're friendly. The writer-director Lee Winnell was the first famous person to follow me on Twitter. And I remember being like, oh my gosh. And William Friedkin was following me on Twitter. Like, you know what I'm saying? And there were interactions that you could have, which essentially made it like a room that you were in and you could just by chance strike up a conversation. And that was real. And then those things did turn into, we've run in the same circles. I walked into an interview one time with Mike Flanagan, who I know has worked with a little bit with the festival. And he was like, Clarke, wait a minute. I follow you on Twitter. I love your Twitter. And I was like, thank you, Mike. And we did an interview. But that's the type of stuff where, like that was invaluable and that was very real. And that was fun. And now it's not fun anymore. Now it feels terrible. It all feels terrible. So the good news is, though, I think a lot of these owners have totally tainted their brands. And so at this point, who knows what companies are looking for in terms of the people they have represent them. But I do think it's actually decentralizing the Meta, and even TikTok now is a weird thing. So who knows? But I'm on there for now, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
You don't have a choice, but yeah, I know. I feel like spitting out that the rebranding of Twitter, the worst rebranding in history was Twitter becoming X, like a porn joke.
Yeah, and well,
but you were talking about the glory days when it was a democratizing platform, and now with algorithmic amplification, it's not democratizing. It's back to just bullshit.
Yeah, and we're seeing too, like Elon's plan for Twitter was always to make it a financial situation, and with the partnership with Visa and all. It's just, it's wild, but it's not social media anymore. That we know.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not. And it's but thankfully there might be other options for us to, right? Because my stupid campfire thing I keep bringing up, like that's actually what I want out of social media, is actually to communicate, to share with my friends who I don't see as often.
Right.
But like, I just can't bring myself to do it anymore. And like I said, well, this will be interesting because you were sitting in a house that had to evacuate 3 weeks ago. And it was fascinating to me who texted me personally.
Right.
Because I wasn't, by the way, like what kind of idiot like posts on Instagram? We're leaving our house today. Here's the picture of the smoke clouds visible from our driveway. Like my wife would have killed me if I told the world that our house was empty. Right. But But yeah, it's. I'm just looking for personal contact with people, and
Yeah.
you can't get that when it's an algorithm just trying to keep you addicted watching ads.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it's
Agreed.
tricky.
Tricky.
It's all tricky.
But you can find me there. Please follow me.
Yeah, especially on Blue Sky. Well, maybe you'll have the first Blue Sky clickable link on here. I don't know. I've never, admittedly, you know what I haven't done? F me. Is this podcast, when I'm about to ramble off all the social media handles and stuff, doesn't have Blue Sky yet.
Well,
Why am I only doing that personally?
we've learned something today.
I think
Light bulb moment.
I think it can be spelled with the letters LAZY. All right. Well, anyway, your stuff will be clickable links, so I don't have to repeat those. And I will say thank you, Clarke, for being here and for coming in person.
Thank you.
And this is the Discover Indie Film podcast, which is devoted to indie filmmakers and their creative pursuits. You can learn more if you go to discoverindiefilm.com, and on social media, it's always at DIFwins. And I'm just going to say it. By the time you're hearing this, there will be a DIF Wins Blue Sky, because DIF Wins was unique enough that I could get it everywhere.
Fair.
Amusingly, it was originally Discover Film, and we actually had Discover Film in most places. And then one of my early guests was like, "Oh, I was just played the Discover Film Awards in London." I'm like, "Oh, all right, let's put indie in there. This is about indie anyway." So anyway, tangent alert. And yes, this podcast gave birth to a TV series that is still on Amazon Prime Video, but you have to pay for it. But my pitch might be, for $7.99, you get 10 half-hour episodes that are 20 to 25 excellent, independently made short films. So, $8 for 25 films. I mean, it's not a horrible deal.
Pretty good math.
It's pretty good. All right, so anyhow, that is, anyway, so that is Discover Indie Film. So check that out. Oh, and like and subscribe to the podcast if you want to be nice. Even write a review. Clarke's film, a shining example. Got those awards at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival last year. This year is the 10th anniversary. So,
Congratulations.
thank you. So, if you want to learn more about the Sherman Oaks Film Festival, we hold it every December, and it's ShermanOaksFF.com and at ShermanOaksFF on social media, maybe including Blue Sky. And it has a sister festival every June called Film Invasion Los Angeles, and you can learn more if you go to filminvasionla.com, and it's at Film Invasion LA on social media. And I'm just going to say it. There's going to be a film invasion in Lima, Peru in 2026.
Wow.
I really think it's happening.
Okay.
There's been so many. There was almost Film Invasion London. There was almost Film Invasion Bay Area or Oakland. There was almost one in Michigan. But the Peru one, I've seen the theater. The theater was emailed. Pictures of the theater were emailed to me. And if I told you what theater rental costs in Lima, Peru versus Los Angeles, California, oh my God. Might be able to fly everyone down. So anyway, all right, so that's the Film Invasion thing. And the last thing is check out indiechannel.tv if you love independent stuff, creator-driven. All right, Clarke, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.